And welcome to the Core. And I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is regeneration. And what is it? What would it look like to incorporate into our lives? What does it require of us in terms of how we're being in order to implement it or engage with it? So before we get started, we're going to take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons even, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take our hands and press our palms together. Rub your palms together and feel the tickling and the tingling and the friction and temperature. And when you stop rubbing them together, feel all that sensation and allow all of those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're talking about regeneration. And this conversation comes from the fact that I've been taking a course from an organization called Regenesis, and it's called the Regenerative Practitioner Series. And it is about regenerative development. And the question is, what is that? So when we look at the word regenerate, it's meaning to generate again. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. Great to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Good morning, Jenny. So good to have you here with us. Jenny says this is going to be interesting. I hope so. I hope so. And maybe even eye-opening, maybe transformational, hopefully. So regenerate means to generate again, right? To generate anew. And it's been very mind-bending, truly mind-bending to be taking this course, because it is about thinking differently. And beyond that, it is learning ways to generate new thought. And that in itself is a profound skill to develop, right? To be able to think anew, to generate something truly new. And this comes out of the calling of our present moment, which is globally so fraught with challenges that we've never had to meet as a species within our history, you know, where we're facing challenges around climate and our environment and pollution and contamination and all kind and political strife and all kinds of things. The political strife we faced before, but never have we faced this kind of climate emergency as a species. And so the question is, the urgency, the calling is to bring forward new ways of dealing with circumstances, because the way that we have typically dealt with things is by farming the past, looking at what we're defining as a problem, and just the nature of defining something as a problem is mired in the past by definition, right? Because it's saying, well, here's the issue, this is the problem, how do we fix it? The problem emerged from the past. So one of the profound shifts that we make in regenerative thinking is to move away from the notion of problems to the notion of potential. So if you just sit with that for a second, you can recognize how radical a concept that is, to shift from the notion of problem to potential. So for instance, what if we have, so Jenny says, renew awakening to shift in perception. That's exactly what we're talking about, is waking up to a new way of perceiving things, of integrating things that will then offer potential and possibility that wasn't available in the definition of the problem, right? So an example, one of the examples that we talked about in the course was thinking about teenagers, for instance. And so many people perceive teenagers as, you know, a problem because they have all this frenetic energy and passion, and it's not necessarily well directed and whatever, you know, like the perpetuation of this generation gap, which is kind of an interesting conversation in and of itself. But anyway, rather than perceiving that passion and energy of teenagers as a problem that we're trying to control, what if we were to be able to perceive the energy and passion and enthusiasm of this group as a resource? What if there is incredible inherent potential in that energy dynamic that offers an incredible resource? You know, so on an ecological level, what if the water water runoff is a rather than seeing it as a problem, maybe we can see it as a resource, and we can find ways to funnel that water back into the land and the aquifers, right? Like, to, instead of defining something as a problem, to be looking at its inherent potential. So Jenny says they're just learning to be themselves, about teenagers. Yeah, and there are ways to funnel all that marvelous energy. So an example that was given about the notion of regeneration was Aikido. And I have not practiced, and my knowledge of Aikido or my awareness of it is extremely limited. So please forgive me if I get this a little bit wrong, but my understanding of Aikido is utilizing the energy of the opponent to end up both facing in the same direction, to use that energy and redirect that energy, so that the opposition completely shifts. And so Jenny says the solution to be the change you want to see. Exactly. The solution is be the change you want to see. Exactly. So the question, you jumped right into where I was headed, Jenny, so thank you for that. The question is, who do we need to be? How do we need to be differently in our, how can we be differently to enable this kind of regenerative change? And so it means to be the change you want to see. So here's an example, and this was really eye-opening for me. It was very profound, actually. I was part of a team in this course, part of a team working on a project, and in our work together, we were kind of working at cross purposes a little bit. You know, it felt a little bit like herding cats, where we were not all facing in the same direction. We weren't really aligned with each other. Not everything we were doing was contributing to forwarding the action, so to speak. And so for our last meeting, I suggested that we utilize the principles of regeneration and what we were learning to create the context for our meeting. So we started with the question, who do we need to be in order to achieve the objective of our time together? What beingness can we bring to this venture that is going to raise it to a higher level of order, a higher order of possibility? Because the whole idea here is to learn strategies or frameworks to be able to generate truly new thought, because our situation, really, our emerging situation, calls for new approaches, right? So it was really interesting. One of the members said that they felt like they needed to listen more carefully to what other people had to say. One of the thing for me was, instead of being in a space of knowing or thinking I know about something, or thinking I know how to do something, instead of coming from that space, to come from a space of curiosity and question, like what might be possible. And so to listen from another space of discovery, you know, rather than listening out of respect or listening to be able to respond, to listen like there's something new available, you know. So that it was fascinating. And for the other person that was part of the group, it was to slow down and not be so committed to finding a solution right away necessarily, but to slow down and entertain other possibilities. So it was really, really, really amazing, because as a result of our commitment to think about this thing in a new way, from a new space, we came up with a whole new idea about the context for what we were doing. like a whole higher order understanding of our project. And it was just the coolest thing to see the principles of regeneration in action. So I'll just be a little bit more specific so that you get a sense of it. So we were working on a project that is a retreat center, like a holistic arts and education center. And the whole notion of regeneration is that things don't operate in a vacuum. So Jenny, you asked me, right? I love that you said what are the principles. So one of the principles is essentially that things don't operate in a vacuum. That when we do something that's regenerative, we look at first the story of place, that each place has its own unique identity, that places are living entities essentially, and they have their own identity and their own calling and their own history, and that place and its identity is essential in its regeneration. So rather than looking at the project itself, we were meant to look at the place in which the project resides, and then to look at the place in which the project resides. So the way that they term it in regeneration or regenesis is that there's the project, then there's the proximate whole, which is the area in which the project is occurring, and then there's what is called the greater whole, which is the area in which the proximate whole resides. So that could get a little confusing, but it's essentially talking about nested holes and talking about how there is this mutual influence that goes up and down the chain of these proximities. So the place impacts its greater context, and it impacts the project. The project impacts the place. It bubbles up and down the ladder kind of thing. And that when there is this reciprocal relationship, when there is this, oh, Jenny says, what kind of holes? WHOLES. So we're talking about, if you look at the human body, a cell is a whole thing in and of itself. And the cells combine to make an organ, which is a whole thing in and of itself. And the organs combine with all kinds of other stuff to make a body, which is its whole thing in and of itself. And so none of those wholes can exist without the others. They all impact each other. And that's WHOLES. So everything impacts everything else. And so seeing ourselves in the context of a greater whole, seeing that we have impact on the living systems of which we are part, and that those living systems have impact on us when we are present to the dynamics of those relationships. That is when we talk about, that's when we're talking about something that can be regenerative. That there is this what they call co-evolving mutuality. There's this evolution that lifts all ships, so to speak. That as I evolve, then my impact on the system evolves. As the system evolves, its impact on me evolves. And the interesting thing is that this is at least a 3-tiered relationship. And the way that I see that three-tiered relationship is kind of like an infinity loop that then takes on its own life. It is able, one level is able to stimulate another, which in turn stimulates another, which in turn comes back and stimulates the first. So, you know, there's this dynamic of motion, and the fact that it's not just two, the fact that it's three, if one kind of drops out, the other two start stimulating or impacting it. So in other words, it's this dynamic flow between these different levels of relationship. And so that's the key. One of the principles of regeneration is that it is about relationship and relatedness and the interrelationships of living systems. So I think I was going to give it, well, anyway, so that makes sense, right? Like when we look at living systems are dynamic and changing all the time. And so it follows that regenerative thinking and regeneration itself is in constant evolutionary change. And the idea is what kinds of engagements will create a richer sense of life, a richer experience of life, that it's about breeding vitality in life and creating a system that has the impulse within it to be expanding life. So when we look at ourselves and our circumstances in life, we often talk about how adversity, challenge holds the seed for potential, right? And so what we're looking at here is to see how to use regenerative principles to be looking at the circumstances of our lives by which we are challenged, to recreate those challenges as opportunities. And we talk about this all the time, just not in the context of regenerative thinking, but it is about creating something new. When we have an experience of disruption, challenge, when we look at something like as a problem, it's a very different context. It creates very different options than if we look at something as an opportunity. And I know that can be really deeply challenging when we have an emotional response to something. But we talk about this all the time, like where a challenge arises or deep painful emotions arise, what I say in the context of my coaching practice is that those things are arising because we're now at a place where we have the capacity to address them. We now have the capacity to take advantage of the opportunity that's being presented to come up with a transformation. So something is arising because we now have an opportunity to heal it. And that's creating a new context, right? It's saying, okay, so now it's arising. This is something new. What do we do How do we address this in a way that's new? How do we transform what might have been adversity into opportunity? What might have been a problem into potential? And that's really what regenerative thinking is about, is how do we generate new life? How do we generate new perspectives? And the foundational answer to that is we get to be different. We get to bring a different sense of being. We get to bring a being sense that is connected to possibility and potential. So with that, that's a worthy exploration for each of us to engage in. What would it look like to look at this in a different way? What would it look like to look at this in a way that opens new opportunities? Welcome, April. So good to have you here with us. Welcome, welcome. So April says, act in old way, get old results. Act new way, get new results. Exactly, 100%. So thank you for that. And I just want to say, I'm wrapping it up for this morning, but I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's great to be with you and start the week together. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel and Facebook page. Jenny says, I've been taking lots of notes over here. That's awesome, Jenny. That's awesome. Hopefully they will come in handy. I encourage you guys to check out all the other wonderful, wonderful programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living, EWN, One with the Earth. And until next time, so much love and appreciation to you. I hope to see you again here really soon.